Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging into, well, the really high-stakes world of Senate negotiations. You know those moments in politics? The ones that feel like a nail-biting thriller where maybe just one vote changes everything. Well, we have definitely got one of those for you. Our mission today is to unpack a specific, really intense moment. It's all about how one senator who's known for her, let's say, fiercely independent spirit, how she navigated this marathon all-night session to cast a pivotal vote. This was on what people were widely calling Trump's Megabill, and we're drawing from a detailed Politico report here, trying to understand the incredible pressure, the strategic maneuvering, and yes, some surprising concessions that played out behind closed doors and right there on the Senate floor, too.
Yeah, and this isn't just about one vote, is it? It's really a masterclass in how a single senator, someone with this truly independent record, how they can leverage that unique position to reshape a massive piece of legislation, even under, extreme pressure. We're going to unpack the strategic thinking, the calculus behind those moments, and see just how much local representation can impact national policy. It's fascinating.
Okay, let's really set the scene then. Try to imagine yourself in the U.S. Senate. It's way past midnight, and they're in the middle of what's called a votorama.
Ah, the votorama.
Exactly. It's this grueling, often all-night session. Dozens of amendments, one after another. It pushes lawmakers to their absolute limits. In this particular one, it stretched for over 24 hours.
It's exhausting to even think about.
Right. The air is thick with tension, and this one huge piece of legislation, Trump's domestic policy megabill, is basically teetering on the edge. The Politico report paints a vivid picture, more than 19 hours into this legislative marathon. The majority whip, Senator John Thune, he was still unsure about locking down one crucial vote. And whose vote was it causing all this drama? Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska.
And that just underscores the extraordinary lengths, really, that legislative leaders go to get the votes on major bills. The fact it went on so long, involved such intense talks, both public and private, it just highlights how critical her vote actually was. It wasn't just about getting a number across the line. It was managing this high-wire act where, the smallest shift could unravel months, maybe years of work.
Okay, so here's what makes Senator Murkowski so pivotal in this story. She isn't just any senator, right? She is defined by this strong independent streak.
Very much so.
The report reminds us, and it's quite famous, she won re-election as a write-in candidate back in 2010.
Unheard of, almost.
Exactly. And more recently, she even voted to convict President Trump during his second impeachment trial, and she opposed some of his key appointees. So for weeks leading up to this votorama, she'd been publicly warning that this specific GOP tax and domestic policy megabill would cause too much, quote, pain for her home state's most vulnerable citizens.
Yeah.
And she just wasn't backing down from that concern.
Exactly right. Her whole political brand, her identity is built on that independence. So this wasn't just another vote for her. It was a real defining test of that identity against, well, immense party pressure. And think about the political cost. Had she actually voted no, fully opposed the bill, it would have almost guaranteed a primary challenge from the right in a potential 2028 re-election bid.
Huge risk.
Massive. Senator Kevin Cramer from North Dakota, for instance, he speculated that Murkowski certainly doesn't want to be the reason it didn't happen. So her position was strategically really precarious, yet she held firm on her concerns.
The suspense must have been just palpable. The question hanging over the Senate chamber wasn't just if the bill would pass, but how it would pass, and who would be that final crucial vote. The report describes Senator Thune, the majority whip, at one point doing something, well, pretty desperate sounding. He actually considered pursuing Senator Rand Paul's vote.
Rand Paul. Wow.
Yeah. A senator Republican leaders had apparently written off weeks ago, just in case Murkowski finally said no. I mean, that tells you everything about how absolutely critical her vote had become.
It really does. And this is where, the really intricate rules of the Senate start to bite. They were trying to add these sweetener provisions, right? Things like boosting Medicaid payments for Alaska and Hawaii.
Trying to win her over, basically.
Exactly. But these attempts were repeatedly shot down. They ran smack into a wall with the Senate parliamentarians. The bill was moving through this special process called reconciliation.
Right, budget process.
Yeah, it's a kind of fast-track procedure. Lets certain budget-related bills pass with just a simple majority, 51 votes. It gets around the usual 60-vote filibuster threat.
What?
And it's a big but.
There's always a catch.
Always. Reconciliation bills have these really strict rules, the Byrd Rule, about what can actually be included. Provisions that aren't strictly budget-related or only have an incidental budget effect, they get thrown out.
So the parliamentarian looked at the Medicaid boost.
I said, nope. Fell outside those strict reconciliation guidelines. It just underscores the very narrow lane Murkowski had to negotiate within.
So, okay, even with those technical rules making things harder, Murkowski was still the absolute linchpin. Senator Jim Justice from West Virginia, he summed it up perfectly, didn't he? Calling Murkowski the key to the whole thing.
Yep, crystal clear.
And Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin noted how many colleagues privately saw leadership's choice as basically coming down between Lisa and Rand.
A drama.
The stakes just couldn't have been higher for getting this bill passed. So given all those constraints, the rules, the pressure, what exactly was she fighting for? Well, the Politico report makes it really clear.
Right.
She was trying to blunt the bill's negative impact on Alaska, especially, it says, for those living in remote areas with, quote, no jobs and not a cash economy.
Very specific Alaskan concern.
Right. She emphasized Alaska's unique needs, saying, and this is a direct quote, I needed help, and I worked to get that every single day. And you know what? Holding out like that, it absolutely paid dividends for. Even with the parliamentarian rejecting some things, she managed to extract some significant concessions. This was happening while she was huddled right there on the Senate floor with leadership staff and Senator Dan Sullivan, the other Alaska Republican.
Imagine that scene. Intense, last-minute negotiations on the floor.
Absolutely. The level of detail is just astounding. The report actually lays out some specific wins she secured for Alaska. Let me list a few.
Yeah.
Okay, first, clean energy tax credits. Important for Alaska's future, presumably. Second, a delay in changes to food aid, specifically for her state. This allowed Alaska, Hawaii, and some other states to temporarily escape higher costs if certain conditions were met.
Okay, so direct help for vulnerable people.
Yes. Third, the promise of massive revenues from oil and gas drilling leases. That's always huge for Alaska.
Of course, big money.
Fourth, getting a controversial tax on solar and wind energy projects removed from the final big amendment package that was negotiated overnight.
Interesting. Protecting renewables, too.
Yeah, a bit of balance there. And then maybe the most specific, almost obscure example, an increase in the tax deductions for bowhead whaling boat captains.
Whaling captains?
Yes.
Yeah.
Captains recognized by the Alaska Eskimo Whaling Commission. The deduction went up to $50,000 from $10,000 for whale hunting expenses.
Wow, that bowhead whaling deduction is, well, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because it perfectly illustrates the power of individual leverage in a legislative process that's balanced on a knife edge.
Right. It seems so small compared to the whole bill, but
Yeah. But it shows how one determined legislator can actually shape a megabill to address these very, very specific state concerns, even tiny ones, despite the huge national agenda. Senator John Curtis of Utah, he put it really well, saying, every state truly does have a voice, and it manifests at different times by different people in different ways.
that's a great quote for this.
It is. Murkowski's success in getting these targeted provisions, even with those strict reconciliation rules hanging over everything, it just demonstrates that a single vote can force real, tangible changes for people back home.
So in the end, after all that drama, all the late-night negotiating, Murkowski did vote for the bill. It formed the core of her party's domestic agenda at the time. But she didn't just, walk away quietly.
No, she definitely had something to say.
Right. Immediately after the vote, she told reporters, and I'm quoting again, I held my head up and made sure that the people of Alaska are not forgotten in this. But I think that there is more that needs to be done, and I'm not done. I am going to take a nap, though.
Huh? You can't blame her for wanting a nap after 24 hours plus.
Definitely not.
But what's really interesting there is her candid admission, right? Calling the bill rushed and imperfect, even as she voted for it. That just highlights the gritty reality of how legislation actually gets made. It's compromise.
Yeah, not always pretty.
Not at all. Sometimes success means voting for the best outcome you could wrestle out of the process, not necessarily the perfect bill you wanted on day one. And her immediate call for both the House and Senate to go to conference committee.
Instead of the House just passing the Senate version.
Exactly. That signals her continued desire to improve it, right? It shows that even after the big vote, the fight over the policy details, it just keeps going. This whole case really makes us think, doesn't it, about the long-term impact of passing legislation that even its supporters admit is imperfect. How do those compromises shape future political fights and the whole legislative landscape down the road?
What a fascinating, intricate deep dive that was into the real dance of legislative power. We've seen how one senator's independent spirit, combined with, frankly, her dedication to her constituents,
Hmm.
how that can become the absolute fulcrum upon which a major national policy swings.
Absolutely, the pivot point.
It's a powerful reminder, isn't it, that even in these huge political battles, individual leverage and smart strategic negotiation can carve out really significant, specific wins. Senator Thune himself, the whip who was sweating her vote, even noted he was, quote, grateful that at the end of the day she concluded what the rest of us did, which is that it was the right direction for the future of our country.
And if we connect this back to the bigger picture, this whole deep dive really shows us the true nature of these legislative fights. It's not always about, grand ideological pronouncements from on high. So often it's about painstaking, sometimes tiny negotiations, small concessions, individual legislators fighting tooth and nail for very particular needs back in their home state.
Like whaling boat deductions.
Exactly. Like whaling boat deductions. And getting that kind of nuanced understanding, I think it's really crucial for appreciating how laws are actually made, piece by painstaking piece.
So what does all this mean for you listening in? Well, maybe next time you hear about a really contentious vote in Congress or a big bill that seems to have some oddly specific carve-outs, maybe consider the behind-the-scenes drama, the unique state needs being debated, and the incredible individual pressure that might be involved. It's definitely a lot more than just a simple yes or no vote.
Much more complex.
So for you, the curious learner,
Hmm.
perhaps the next step is to look up some other instances, where maybe a single vote held the balance of power, or how other specific state issues end up influencing national policy that ultimately affects your life too.